Number 10. Lancet fish. The lancet fish was a rare fish to encounter. This was very simply because of the fact that fishermen could never reach them for one reason or another, and thus the only true way to find them was if they were washed up on shore after dying, which honestly applies to a lot of sea creatures, both bizarre and non. Over the last few years though, that's started to change. Fishermen are using different techniques now, and lancet fish are being caught more and more frequently, much to the joy of scientists who are using the fish to learn more about the oceans. What really makes the lancet fish so special though isn't its rarity, but that it lives in a part of the ocean where the light of the sun barely reaches at all. Known as the midnight zone, there the waters of the ocean are pitch black, meaning that fish either have to create their own light or use their other senses to get around. So it's a fish that is more than happy to be without light, and that's a bit bizarre in context. The fishermen who are lucky enough to catch them put them back into the ocean due to their inability to survive in things like aquariums, adding yet another bizarre fact to a pretty bizarre and frightening looking fish. Oh, and if you need a reason to never seek out this fish, it's believed to be both very aggressive and cannibalistic in nature. Some even refer to it as nature's Hannibal. Number 9. Tiger shark with an arm inside. In 1935, a pair of brothers decided to go fishing off of the coast of Australia. While off in the waters near Sydney, they decided to bait their lines, leave them in the water, and then go to sleep. When they woke up, they found their fishing line frayed and a bunch of fish parts all over it. When they reeled it in, there was a tiger shark attached to it, and it was still alive. The brothers took the shark to shore, but the tiger shark wouldn't settle down, nor die. So the brothers gave it to a nearby aquarium, which objectively might have been the best thing for this shark, given what was about to happen next. You see, a little while after being given to the aquarium, the shark went and threw up. Nothing wrong with that, right? Except what he threw up was a human arm. Now, being fair, tiger sharks are known to attack humans, and what's more, if a tiger shark was to go around and eat a human, they would naturally have some body parts within them. It's just rare that we get to that point in regards to seeing the parts come back out. But that's not the only bizarre thing that happened with this shark. Examination of the arm found that the victim was most definitely not dead in the ocean somewhere, as the arm was cut off by a knife and a tattoo on the arm was able to be identified and tied to the death of a former boxer turned police informant, Jim Smith. He decided to blackmail some people and got killed for his troubles. The arm was kept as proof of the deed, and then, once done, the killers threw it into the ocean. This arm actually helped solve the mystery of Smith's death. So, while a bit disgusting and incredibly bizarre in how these random events led to a case being solved, some good came about because the shark upchucked an arm. Number 8. The Mud Dweller. This particular fisherman tale is of a frightening mud-dwelling creature that man wouldn't know what to do with upon seeing it. Andrew Rose was fishing in the Northern Territory's Kakadu National Park when he snagged a 15-centimeter long worm goby, a rare, mud-dwelling fish with no eyes, a bony head, and sharp teeth. So again, not something you would know what to do with because your natural instinct might be to call it a monster. It looked prehistoric, Rose told Guardian Australia. It looked like something you see in the movies. The lure wasn't swimming right. I pulled it and it had this strange-looking fish on it. We didn't know what it was. We took photos, took him off the hook, and put him back in the water. While the creature was eventually identified correctly, the angler, his friend, and many people who saw the creature online via the pictures had another notion, mainly that it was very much like the xenomorph from the legendary movie franchise Alien. Rose's friend said that it even resembled the particular xenomorph that came out of one of the stomachs of the original Alien crew. Obviously, that isn't the case, and we should all be grateful it isn't. But now, one has to wonder if this is a case of life imitating art, or art imitating life. Number 7. Mummified sailor. Not all catches have to be fish, or even aquatic in nature. And trust us when we say there have been plenty of odd finds amongst catches that shocked even those catching it. For example, Fritz Bajorat went to sail his boat in 2009. He'd been going through some hard times, including splitting up with his wife. He was never seen alive again. Then, in 2016, a couple of fishermen were doing some work about 50 miles off the coast of the Philippines, and while doing that work, they came across the ship belonging to Fritz Bajorat. And inside it was Fritz, and he was completely mummified, which was very odd given that he was encased in water. The oddness of the find doesn't stop there though, because Fritz was found in his ship at the position of being right next to the radio. Given that no distress signal was heard from his ship when he disappeared in 2009, it's believed he was just resting there when a heart attack or stroke or other natural death happened upon him, and this was later confirmed that a heart attack took his life. It's still not fully known what exactly happened to him, but it is a catch that is most bizarre given all that happened, both past and present. Number 6. The Orange Creature. In Alaska in 2018, the family of angler Sarah Vassar-Alford were on what was supposed to be a basic fishing trip. However, things got very weird when they pulled up a creature that can honestly only be described as alien. It was bright orange, had all sorts of wriggling tendrils, and looked like nothing they had ever seen before. And one look at it will likely give you a similar curious feeling in regards to wondering what the heck you're looking at. Sarah took a video clip of the creature and posted it online for the world at large to see, and various people weighed in on what it was, and just as importantly, what it wasn't. It's since been identified as a basket star, a species of echinoderm similar to a sea star, aka starfish, that hangs out on the ocean floor, using its spindly, spiderweb-like tentacles to ensnare passing prey. It's good to know what this creature is, so I don't see it in my nightmares later. Also, should you be curious of the fate of the creature, once the video was made, Sarah returned it to the waters of Alaska. Number 5. Coelacanth. One of the biggest wonders of the ocean is that we can't possibly know all that's within it, but we can guess based on fossil records and other sources. The problem though is that sometimes a creature is caught that boggles the mind simply because it was believed extinct. In this case, 65 million years extinct, or so people thought. Despite this extinct status, the coelacanth was rediscovered by a fisherman off the coast of Africa. This fish was from the Cretaceous period, back when dinosaurs ruled the Earth. As time went on and various changes to the Earth occurred, it was just assumed that the coelacanth was extinct, especially when fossils of the creature were found and no other fish in the water that we knew of looked like it. So this wasn't a case of a random guess leading to a premature belief, it was seemingly validated. Then, in 1938, a marine biologist found this long-dead fish while looking through a fisherman's hole, and not only was it a coelacanth, it looked exactly like the fossils that were found of its kind. But how is this possible? The answer is that humanity has sadly only mapped a small fraction of the ocean, and we're constantly learning more about it all the time. There are new species found in the ocean every year due to it not being mapped well. So it's not hard to imagine the coelacanth species simply not being noticed until a very lucky fisherman caught it. Eventually, another species of coelacanth was found in Indonesia, further proving that the species is alive and well, and that this bizarre catch was one that was very fortuitous to the scientific community. Number 4. A dinosaur-like sea creature. This particular catch happened in September of 2019 by a Norwegian fisherman named Oscar Lundahl. He went viral on the internet when he found himself looking at a fish that was downright dinosaur-like in shape and appearance. Its eye caught a lot of people's attention due to it not being the right size compared to other fish of its like. Oscar Lundahl nearly jumped out of his fishing boat when he pulled the strange creature onto his boat, and it's not hard to see why that would be. The man was fishing for halibut, and this is not that at all. He told The Sun, "We were looking for blue halibut, which is a rare species about 5 miles offshore. I had 4 hooks on one line and felt something quite big on the end of it. It took me about 30 minutes to reel it in because it was over 2,600 feet deep. As for what the fish honestly is, that would be a ratfish. It dates back over 300 million years, which indeed puts it in the realm of dinosaurs. And they are very special because they're known to not be caught by fishermen because they prefer to live in the deeper parts of the ocean. So this is a fisherman's tale that involves ancient creatures, a lucky catch, and a fisherman who likely hopes to never see anything like this again. And we can't blame him. Number 3. The Chimera lobster. In Greek mythology, the Chimera is a creature that had the body parts of multiple animals, including a lion, snake, eagle, griffin, and more, depending on the interpretation. In the real world, a chimera is defined as an entity with cells of two different organisms living and growing inside of them at the same rate, such as when a Japanese fisherman caught a lobster that had different colorations, ones that were perfectly divided down the middle of its body. Ironically enough, this kind of divide is natural for a lobster, as their body grows separately in each half, but to have this kind of a color formation, especially one this distinct and perfectly divided, is a rarity in and of itself. After it was studied and determined to be a chimera, it was given to Maine's Mount Desert Oceanarium, where it will live out the rest of its life. Still, even though it's a known entity in terms of what went on with this lobster, you can't help but think it's really bizarre. Number 2. Two-mouthed fish. As we've shown you, there are all kinds of bizarre fish in the world, but some of them are just bizarre because you've never seen their species before. However, there have been catches that go beyond that basic level of weirdness, such as when angler Debbie Getters went and pulled out a fish that quite literally had two mouths on it. In case you think it's a hoax, it's not. It's a very real fish and was proven to be that. After posting pictures of it online, people were very curious as to how it was born this way, and even how it lived with this unique deformity. Some said it was from an injury, some thought it was because of pollution in the New York lake that it was caught in. Another possibility was that this was a birth defect, which has been documented to happen in various fish over the years. It's impossible to know what caused it, but it happened. And it was very much alive when it was caught. You've got to wonder, are there more of these two-mouthed fish out there? Number 1. The one-eyed shark. Now, let's talk about a tale that was deemed fake right up until it was proven not to be. I'm talking about when a fisherman off Baja, California took pictures of a one-eyed shark and people immediately started crying out fake, which in this case, you can see why they would say that. The twist came in when a few weeks after the first pictures were taken, another set of them featuring the one-eyed shark appeared, and this time it appeared to have gotten some age on it. After some investigations by some real reporters, they found out it was a real one-eyed shark. However, there's even another twist here. It was a deformed fetus from a caught pregnant bull shark. How the deformation and albino coloring occurred wasn't clear, but it was clear that it was real and rare. One expert said that 50 of these kinds of creatures have been documented, so that makes it not only a bizarre catch, but an incredibly rare one. It just took a while for the catch to be believed, but better late than never. Number 10. Sneaky baby seal. Most of us know seals as cute creatures at the beach or zoo that balance balls on the tips of their nose or eat fish out of their keeper's hands. But we don't usually get to see aquatic animals outside of their natural habitat, and we especially don't often see them in ours. In New Zealand, a very unusual criminal was caught breaking into the house of Claire Christian. But instead of running out of the door in fear like most of us would have, she pulled out her camera and started filming. Much to her delight, she was the victim of a sneaky baby seal's brazen home invasion. The sweet little guy somehow managed to break into her house, lounge around her living room, sit by the fire, and just sit back, making itself at home. When she arrived to find the intruder loitering in her house, the adorable critter tried to hide behind the furniture, almost as if it knew it was up to no good. Nobody knows exactly how the seal broke into her house or where it came from, but after it was done, it wandered out the front door and went back about its business. This would have been the perfect time to have hidden cameras in your house. But sadly, Claire wasn't so prepared with her tech. Apparently, having a baby seal break into your house is just another day in New Zealand. Number 9. Curious lion. In a far less adorable home invasion, an Asiatic lion strolled into a farmer's house in the small Indian village of Gujarat. Asiatic lions are native only in regions of India. This particular homeowner was shocked when he walked in the door and saw a fully grown lion relaxing on his couch. According to the local reports, the lion had just finished eating one of the farmer's buffalo calves before sneaking in through a back door and then taking a bit of a nap. After all, it was late on a Sunday, the perfect time to relax. While it's sad for the calf, it's good for the farmer that the lion had a full stomach. Who knows what would have happened if the big cat's stomach was rumbling? Not knowing what to do and terrified, the farmer ran away to get the forest officials. He had 14 other family members in the house, so he had to act quickly in order to avoid any trouble. When the officials arrived, the lion was still lounging without a care in the world. They had to shoo the big cat out of the house and back into the jungle. It took multiple men and over 2 hours to get the lion out. That's one stubborn cat. Number 8. Invasion of killer bees. While bees are crucial to the natural world, pollinating flowers and helping the ecosystem, they aren't an uncommon fear. Many people see bees and immediately get nervous, thinking that they might get stung. That's with one bee. Imagine the fear and sheer terror an entire swarm could bring. In Texas, an invasion of killer bees almost killed a person's dog and left the owner suffering immense pain from over 80 stings. It happened on a Monday when Austin resident Emily Frank was out on a walk with her dog Dexter. They were strolling near the Onion Creek Greenbelt when out of nowhere a giant swarm of Africanized honeybees came out of the bushes angry with the intent to kill. According to Emily, they mostly went after her dog. At one point, her dog was laying on the ground completely blanketed with bees, a horrific sight for any pet owner. For those who don't know, Africanized honeybees are wildly aggressive and have been known to chase people or other animals down in huge swarms. They can cover a human in just seconds, stinging them to death. They began invading Texas in the 1990s and react violently to any loud noise or vibration that disturbs their hive. Sometimes, even just mowing the lawn can cause a swarm of bees to try and murder you. Just one more thing to worry about in Texas. Poor Dexter ended up being sent to the animal hospital where it took him 3 days to recover. All the bee stings had given him acute liver failure. To be honest, he's lucky he even survived the incident. Plus, Emily herself had to spend some time in the emergency room with a deadly fever and her whole face became swollen from countless bee stings. Number 7. Pianist bear. Having your home invaded by a bear isn't all that uncommon in Vail, Colorado, but for Katie Hawley, a bear break-in left her with a story unlike any other. Katie had left her kitchen window unlocked and a clever beast managed to slide it open and crawl into her house. But instead of going on a destructive rampage, the bear sat down and simply played the piano. This bear happened to be a secret pianist, and it had apparently broken into Katie's house to practice some new songs. Who knew that when the furry beasts weren't stealing picnic baskets or eating honey, they were making music? It didn't play very well since it mostly just banged on the keys with its huge paws, but it seemed to be having a pretty fun time. And hey, who are we to say he wasn't playing well? It's not like we're skilled pianists. Or bear pianists. The amazing incident was caught on one of Katie's home surveillance cameras. When she first arrived home to find her house in a bit of a mess, she thought she'd been burglarized. But after she checked the surveillance video footage, she saw that the bear had gone into her freezer, stolen a bit of food, hammered out a few musical tunes on a piano, and then got out of there before the authorities arrived. As of right now, the bear has yet to perform any encores, but you can bet we'd buy tickets. Number 6. Rampaging deer. An elderly woman living in Indiana had her apartment burglarized by a trio of misbehaving deer. The wild animals busted in through her bedroom window, knocking the woman over and leaving her cowering behind her living room couch as the deer rampaged through the apartment, checking out all the rooms, especially the bathroom. The shocked senior citizen, terrified and not knowing what to do, had to crawl to her telephone and phone the police. Luckily, they arrived quickly enough to shield the woman from any harm while herding the deer out of the apartment. According to Sergeant Kevin Gerber, the elderly woman had remained very calm during the entire ordeal, which may be why she walked away without any injuries. As for why the deer invaded her apartment, well, it was probably an accident. Probably. Deer don't usually break into people's homes on purpose or make house calls. It took a bit of work, but the cops did manage to get the deer back outside. At which point they ran off and were never seen again, probably because they were just as scared of the woman as she was of them. Number 5. Sleepy tiger. In India, after a series of devastating floods in the Assam region, a Royal Bengal tiger was discovered relaxing on somebody's bed. The poor cat had probably broken into a person's house to escape the floods, then fell asleep on the individual's bed. The homeowner wasn't even the one who found the tiger. It was his neighbors who watched the beast wander into the house, and he was lucky too, because they warned him not to go inside. If he had wandered into his house not knowing the tiger was resting in there, he very well may have ended up as lunch. Escaping a flood is hard work after all, and would have helped the tiger build up quite the appetite. The locals were quick to summon the animal officials to deal with the rogue critter. When they arrived at the man's house where the beast was still taking shelter, they tranquilized it and took it to safety. Thankfully, no one was eaten alive or even harmed in the process. The flooding in the Assam region, while displacing thousands of people, had also displaced quite a few wild animals. 95% of the Kaziranga National Park, home to tigers and endangered rhinos, was flooded. It took days for the water to recede, and for much of the wildlife to return to their own homes instead of seeking temporary shelter in a human's. Number 4. Hungry mountain lion. A family in Colorado was visited by an unwanted house guest, with this insane home invasion ending in tragic bloodshed. According to Kayla Slaughter, who has an ironic last name considering the situation, she and her roommate returned home at around 10:30 p.m. to find a mountain lion standing in their living room. The lion looked directly at Kayla's roommate and licked its lips. Terrified, the roommate turned and ran, but Kayla stayed behind to take a few pictures of the enormous cat, looking like an oversized kitty lounging on the couch. Yes, instead of finding safety from the wild animal, Kayla took photos. It almost looked like it was annoyed because the roommates had interrupted its TV time, or maybe because they didn't ask permission before snapping pics. But then again, it didn't ask when it broke into their house. Kayla did eventually run away as she and her roommate phoned the police. Shortly after, wildlife officers came and the animal was removed from the apartment. That was when Kayla came across the corpse of Klondike, her cat. Not only had the mountain lion ruined their furniture, it also ate their poor cat. As for where it went after the murder, the officers shooed the fearless predator out the front door. It wandered down the street and back into the wild, where it belongs. Number 3. Elephant bulldozer. Elephants aren't usually thought of as dangerous creatures. In fact, most of us see them as friendly giants. But reality isn't always what we want it to be. Elephants are actually very dangerous, and many people have lost their lives to the massive beasts. For example, in the small village of Hua Hin, Thailand, an elephant made a surprise appearance by bulldozing its way through the wall of someone's house and sticking its enormous head into their kitchen. The poor woman was lying in bed when she heard the crash. She jumped out of bed, ran into her kitchen, and saw the elephant with its head through her wall, rummaging through her kitchen drawers with its trunk. She assumed the beast was looking for a late-night snack, but hey, who knows? Luckily, elephants aren't typically aggressive unless provoked. This curious guy was probably just hungry. The woman took a few photographs. Without them, it's doubtful anyone would have ever believed this happened. Then she shooed the elephant away and went back to sleep. She's now waiting for the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation to come through with the money to help compensate for the damages the elephant did to her house. Because, let's be honest, the elephant probably isn't going to pony up any cash for its rude intrusion. They aren't known for being wealthy animals. Number 2. Misbehaved kangaroo. A group of tourists got the real Australian experience when a misbehaving kangaroo broke into their vacation home. Amazingly, the kangaroo completely ignored the people inside, went straight for the kitchen and helped itself to a jar of Vegemite and a bag of chips. Not the best snack choice combination in our opinion, but hey, each their own. This hilarious home invasion happened near the coast of New South Wales, at the tourists' rental cabin on Murramarang Beach. Even as they tried chasing the large marsupial out of the house, it just kept hopping around and looking for more food. When it finished snacking in the kitchen, it casually made its way to the bedroom, hoping to find more tasty goodness. Believe it or not, this isn't the only incident of its kind. Eastern grey kangaroos are common in this part of Australia. Over 100 of the feisty critters have been spotted loitering all over the beachfront where the rental cabins are located. This is because they've learned that the curious tourists will usually hand out food. When there's not enough food being handed out on the beach, some of the braver kangaroos resort to home invasions and burglary. But you can't help but love them. Number 1. Bees versus penguins. An invading swarm of bees recently massacred nearly 100 penguins in South Africa. The swarm of insects descended on a beach just outside of Cape Town. The poor penguins were actually part of the Simonstown colony. The bees are also part of the local ecosystem, but they live farther from the coast in the national park. It's highly unusual for that many bees to go all the way down to the seashore, and even rarer for them to attack penguins. I mean, who does that? Penguins are so innocent looking and cute. Nobody can say why the bees invaded the penguins' territory. 63 of the flightless birds were found dead on the beach, killed by excessive stinging. Scientists also found fallen bees all over the beach, hundreds of the things. According to David Roberts, a clinical veterinarian with the South African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds, autopsies revealed that the penguins had only been stung on the eyeballs. Ugh! Strange considering how small they are compared to the rest of a penguin's body. It's a pretty small target, and it's one of the weirdest incidents that's ever happened there, and it's left conservationists shocked and confused. David Roberts also went on to say that the penguins are a protected species on the brink of extinction. Having so many die at once because of a rogue swarm of bees is absolutely horrible and definitely not good for their preservation. Hopefully, this kind of thing doesn't happen again. Number 10. The biggest spider ever. The most terrifying creature that's ever walked the face of the earth was, unfortunately and unsurprisingly, a spider. Well, it was spider-like at least. It was a type of creature known as a megarachne, an ancestor of an extinct group of arthropods. When the scientists first discovered it, they misidentified it as an ordinary spider, believing it to be the biggest one that ever existed at a whopping 21 inches. If the original classification had been correct and this thing was just a spider, it would have been big enough to hunt common house cats. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about them anymore. In truth, it was more like a giant sea scorpion with long legs that it used to chow down on critters in swampy environments. It came into existence during the late Carboniferous era, about 300 million years ago, and it lived in what is now known as North America. But even though this creature wasn't technically a spider, it's still good that it doesn't exist today because it would be absolutely terrifying. Nobody wants to encounter an almost 2-foot-long creepy crawly with spiky legs like a scorpion with a fat spider body. That literally sounds like a nightmare come to life. Number 9. Giant millipede. There was once a millipede that lived on our planet. This insect was so big that it would have made even the bravest person alive pee their pants without question. The millipede was larger than any living human, the largest land invertebrate to ever exist. The millipede was on average at least 6 feet long and more than 1.5 feet wide. Although scientists say it probably could have grown to be over 7 feet in length, that's taller than the average NBA basketball player. It's called the Arthropleura, and it dominated the lush forests of North America over 300 million years ago. At the time this terrifying beast was alive, nothing else, on land at least, could match its size. It was a giant, literally. It also had no known predators, so it's strange that the behemoth insect went extinct. Scientists were able to take a look at the creature's armor thanks to some well-preserved fossils, discovering that the armor was only a few millimeters thick. This is quite a bit thinner than the shells on modern crustaceans like shrimp or crabs, meaning it didn't really need to protect itself from anything trying to eat it. The armor was more or less just for a show of power. To give you an idea about how truly massive this millipede was, when researchers in New Mexico discovered ancient tracks left behind by the Arthropleura, they described them as being similar to tire tracks left behind by a giant truck. Now that's a big bug. Number 8. The Megalodon. A few years ago, a movie came out called The Meg. It featured a massive prehistoric shark beast that terrorized scientists and the ocean. This fictional movie actually held a few truths, but most of it was just for show. And while it may be intriguing to think a megalodon could still be living in our oceans today, the truth is that scientists have found zero evidence to support the possibility. It's also true that if a megalodon did live in our oceans still, we would probably know about it. These prehistoric monsters could grow to be over 60 feet in length, like great white sharks, except the size of mythical dragons. In fact, the great white shark is only 1/3 the length of the megalodon. For those who are worried about swimming in the ocean because of a shark attack, the possibility of being attacked by a megalodon would basically make every ocean in the world a no-swim zone. Say bye-bye to sunset walks on the beach. In fact, if megalodons were still around, these prehistoric predators may have stopped us from ever exploring the ocean to begin with. The second someone built a boat and set sail, they probably would have been eaten, their boat and all, by a giant megalodon. Thankfully, these prehistoric sharks went extinct about 3.6 million years ago. Scientists believe they were actually wiped out by the great white shark. And so, the sharks we know and love became so numerous and so skilled at hunting that they ended up stealing all the food from the larger megalodons. That's just natural selection for you. What would you do if you saw a megalodon in the water? Let us know your plan of action in the comments down below. If you liked the video so far, make sure you subscribe to see more. Number 7. Monster worm. An international team of scientists recently discovered a giant primordial worm, a creature that is thankfully now extinct. It was researchers from the University of Bristol who uncovered the ancient worm fossil, which is now stored at a museum in Ontario. The fossil had been at the museum since the 1990s, but nobody had known exactly what it was for years. Finally, they identified it as an extinct bristleworm from nearly 400 million years ago. This specimen was a distant relative of our modern earthworms and leeches, but it had the biggest jaws ever recorded for a worm. It may not sound big, but their jaws reached about 1 centimeter in length. This is big enough that you would have been able to see them with your naked eye. Just imagine looking at an earthworm in your garden and seeing a big toothy grin on its wormy face. No thank you, we'll pass. Modern worms have jaws so small that you need a microscope to look at them. While the bristleworm may not have been the biggest threat, we're still glad it's extinct. Just so there's one less creepy crawly to worry about while gardening. Number 6. The Australian drop bear. If you were to go on the Museum of Australia's webpage, you'd find information about the drop bear, the most outrageous marsupial in our country's history. According to the museum, the drop bear has colourful orange fur, and it's between the size of a dog and a leopard. The bear used to feast on the flesh of kangaroos and wallabies, and it's also wildly aggressive towards foreigners, which right away seems like a red flag. The truth is, drop bears don't exist, but us Australians have been making up stories about them for decades to scare tourists. The myth is that drop bears are relatives of modern koalas and that they ambush human victims from the tops of trees, dropping from above to attack unsuspecting visitors, unless you cover yourself in Vegemite. But hey, here's where things get even weirder. Nobody knows where the myth of the drop bear came from. We've been talking about these jungle predators since at least the 1970s, but the legend could go back much further. This has led to speculation that sometime in Australia's not-so-distant past, maybe a few hundred years ago, there really were killer koalas living in the trees, pouncing on the innocent. And maybe there still are. Number 5. The giant wolf. The epicyon was the original ancestor of the dog we all know and love today, living across the plains of North America from between 15 to 5 million years ago. This was during the Miocene era. And if you think about it, ancient direwolves were big before they went extinct about 10,000 years ago, and the epicyon was at least twice their size. These incredible canines were about 5 feet in length and weighed up to 300 pounds. They ate a pure diet of just meat, and scientists know them as the largest prehistoric dog that's ever existed. Because the epicyon was a true canid, it is a direct ancestor of wolves, hyenas, and every dog you see while walking around the park today. But it was a completely different monster, unbelievably powerful with jaws that could easily crush a human skull. But unfortunately, we don't actually know all that much about these ancient animals. Not too many fossils have been found, and so scientists haven't been able to decipher their behavior. We don't know if they exclusively feasted on dead animals like modern hyenas, if they hunted in packs like grey wolves, or if they were solitary creatures like big cats. The only thing scientists can agree on is that they were outrageously scary and dangerous. Number 4. Godzilla monster. There was once a monster very much like Godzilla who lurked in the ancient seas. The beast was only recently identified by scientists who found its fossilized skull in Argentina. It was a distant relative of our modern crocodile, an ancient marine monster about 12 feet long with flippers like a dolphin and a fin tail like a fish. The monster is called Daikosaurus andinensis, and it lived only in the water. So there was no worries about the monster attacking Tokyo. What made the creature truly unusual is that it had a snout like a T-Rex, making it look like an aquatic Godzilla. It was almost like a mix between a Tyrannosaurus and a giant crocodile. According to Diego Pohl with the Ohio State University, the prehistoric marine predator was definitely part of the crocodile family tree. But it was unlike any other crocodiles that had been found. When it was alive 135 million years ago, other crocodiles had skinny snouts with teeth like needles for catching fish. But this crocodile had a short snout with large serrated teeth for terrorizing large sea creatures, leaving its origin and disappearance a mystery. But perhaps we shouldn't ask too many questions and just be grateful we no longer have to worry about Daikosaurus andinensis while we swim. Number 3. The original king of beasts. Today, the African lion is the king of the beasts and jungle, but 22 million years ago, there was a different ruler prowling the jungle. It was a carnivore that's only recently been identified by paleontologists, a creature they say was larger than a polar bear. But it wasn't actually a big cat, it was a predatory mammal, a top carnivore on the food chain before cats or dogs even made it onto the evolutionary scene. The animal was a type of hyaenodon named Simbakubwa. It differed from modern predators in the fact that it had 3 sets of teeth for slicing up meat. Modern carnivores only have a single set of back teeth that they use to chew meat. The extra blades in this beast's mouth meant it had very long jaws, which made its head look way too big for its body. In fact, one of the scientists involved in the study of the Simbakubwa compared it to the warg monsters from the Lord of the Rings movies, the big mutant creatures that the orcs ride. While no orcs that we know of hitched a ride on the Simbakubwa, it did get picked off by Mother Nature to our delight and relief. Number 2. The half-ton ape. Gigantopithecus was not the type of creature you would ever want to meet in a dark alley at night. This ancient extinct ape was absolutely giant, weighing over a ton, and standing, no joke, over 9 feet tall. Picture a gorilla standing on top of Bigfoot and you might be getting close to its height. This is about how large the Gigantopithecus was. Fossils of this extinct ape were first found in a Chinese cave back in 1935. So far, its bones have been dated back 1.9 million years. However, very few have ever been found. For this reason, nobody knows exactly where the giant monkey fits on the ape family tree. Based on its teeth, scientists believe his closest living relative is the orangutan. They say these 2 apes separated along their paths of evolution from one common ancestor about 12 million years ago. We don't know exactly what happened to this giant ape, how widely dispersed it was around the globe, or even how it behaved. All we know is that it definitely existed, a gigantic ape more like a dinosaur or King Kong than a monkey. Number 1. The T-Rex of the Sea. A few miners in Alberta, Canada were digging for gemstones when they accidentally came across a prehistoric monster that once dominated the sea. They found an almost complete skeleton of a marine predator called a Tylosaurus, a type of mosasaur that lived 70 million years before today. And yeah, you should be happy that this ferocious thing no longer exists. It would have made a trip to the beach a guaranteed death sentence, just like so many other creatures on this list. According to Donald Henderson from the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, Alberta, the marine dinosaur was at least 23 feet long. It was an apex predator that mostly ate turtles, fish, and other dinosaurs of its own kind. So yeah, it was also a cannibal. It had backwards teeth on the roof of its mouth, so that whatever it took into its jaws had no way to get out. Whatever the giant beast swallowed, it had no choice but to go down its throat and into its belly. This creature lived during a time when much of Canada was actually underwater, which is why its fossil was discovered by miners digging for gems in the desert. Number 11. Wasp versus tarantula. The world of insects and arachnids is one many people don't want to talk about because of how the creepy crawlies terrify them so much. Arachnophobia is a pretty common fear, and I'll admit I'm not too keen on the little guys myself. But the sad fact is these two worlds of spiders and insects is expansive and interesting and have all sorts of species that collide with each other, for better or for worse. Check out this fight between a wasp and a tarantula. Now to be clear, this battle isn't as one-sided as you think. Yes, tarantulas are bigger, but wasps are literally made to be spider killers. And so, for a 9-year-old kid from Arizona that so happily recorded the fight, it was anything but a wash, at first. Because while the tarantula did try to get the first move, it was the opening gambit of the wasp that turned out to be the deciding factor. These wasps are called spider killers for a reason. They have a sting that is able to literally paralyze its prey, which you can see in this footage as the tarantula was up on all of its legs about to strike when the wasp managed to get its venom into its 8-legged foe and literally put the tarantula into a freeze frame. What happened next is honestly a bit gruesome, but let's just say the wasp found an item to lay its eggs in. You can figure out the rest, right? Number 10. Snake versus porcupine. Here's one that you probably wouldn't expect, but does happen fairly regularly depending on the species. Because when it comes to snakes, they're known to handle prey in one of two ways. The first is biting their victim and poisoning them, and the second is through constriction. Especially for creatures like boa constrictors, it's literally in their name. The constrictors use their massive frames to squeeze the life out of prey so they can eat them without any issues. But in the case of this boa constrictor, it didn't go the way it wanted to. We say that because while it's true snakes do eat porcupines, they tend to eat them all at once, but this boa tried to try out its constriction method and got nothing but spines in return. First of all, ouch! Second of all, you'd think the snake would have realized this was going to be a bad idea, but nope, it still went through with it. The poor porcupine was just trying to defend itself. If you're curious, when snakes do eat porcupines properly, they actually allow the spines to be swallowed inside of them. It doesn't bother them, especially after digestion. But in this case, yeah, it bothered this snake quite a bit. Live and learn, Mr. Boa. You have to live and learn to survive in this world. Number 9. Rhino versus Hippo. In Africa, there are all kinds of creatures you should be mindful and fearful of. Your mind might immediately think of things like lions and cheetahs, but there are some that aren't as obvious. Thanks to media portrayals, some animals fly under the radar in terms of danger, just like the rhino in Hippo. Movies like Madagascar depict cartoon-friendly animals, but in reality, they really aren't so sweet. For example, in South Africa, at a game reserve, footage was caught of a rhino and a hippo going at it in fierce combat with each other. Or at least the kind of fierce combat you can expect from two bulky animals. You see, near an airstrip at the game reserve, a slightly smaller than average hippo wandered up to a group of rhinos, which are known as a crash, believe it or not, and started to, let's just say, impose itself upon them, to put it nicely. The rhinos, of course, weren't a fan of this, and thus began the scuffle. The hippo tried to be intimidating with its powerful mouth, but the rhinos weren't afraid and used their horns and size to chase it away. The ranger on the scene who filmed the interaction noted that these two creatures having an altercation was pretty unheard of, and yet it happened, and now it's on the internet for all to see. Now, before you think the hippo was a fool for fighting the rhinos, hippos are mighty creatures. They can run fast, bite a person in half if they want to, and knock over boats with ease. In a 1 versus 1 fight, the results might have been different, but attacking a group of these basically living tanks, not so much. The hippo probably should have thought twice on that one. What would you do if you saw a rhino and a hippo going at it? Let us know in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe for more great content. Number 8. Primate versus primate. As you all likely know, primates are the closest animals in the world to humans as far as DNA goes. A very interesting fact, wouldn't you say? And not unlike humans, they have fights within their own families. But what many fail to realize is that these fights can get downright vicious and brutal, a lot worse than anything you'd see at Thanksgiving. At one zoo, when a family of gorillas decided to get into a spat with each other, onlookers watched in shock. So where's the mismatch? Simple, much of the family decided to attack the biggest gorilla of the bunch at once, which in this case was incredibly stupid because this alpha gorilla towered over the rest of them and as a result had much more mass to put power into. The captured clips showed the alpha gorilla going ape and dragging away one of the smaller gorillas and chasing others all around the pen. Apparently, a baby gorilla was even hurt as a result of the fight. This kind of behavior isn't what we expect usually because gorillas are known to be quite gentle, but in this case, they were anything but. Number 7. Chimps versus raccoon. Okay, this is a matchup that we're pretty sure no one could have seen coming. And trust us when we say that this is the most brutal fight on the list, by far. You see, at a chimpanzee enclosure, a group of chimps were rummaging around their pen when all of a sudden they saw something out of the ordinary. Hidden within the greenery of the pen was a raccoon. Apparently, chimps hate raccoons almost as much as humans. So what did they do? They straight up mobbed it and started beating the crap out of it. We're not exaggerating this. Look at how vicious the chimps are. At one point, they even started throwing the raccoon into the air to send it flying across the pen. Surely it escaped after that, right? Wrong. Because as the raccoon went to retreat into a nearby pipe, which is likely how it got into the pen in the first place, the chimps grabbed it by the tail, pulled it out, and started punching it all over again. Thankfully, the raccoon did eventually get a chance to escape, but the brutality of these chimps was something frightening. And a good reminder that while it might seem like a neat idea to have a monkey as a pet, this could be the result if you happen to tick them off. Number 6. Hippo versus elephant. As we've already shown you, hippos can be quite aggressive when they want to be. The problem though is that just like before, a hippo picked the wrong opponent to go up against. In this case, an African elephant, which just so happens to be one of the biggest animals in the world. Oops. I mean, hippos really need to learn some common sense. So what happened here? Well, unlike the last incident, you could at least see where the hippo was coming from in its attack. As one photographer witnessed, a group of hippos were bunched together in an African river as an elephant decided to wade across it. Not an antagonizing move, right? Well, it wouldn't have been, except for the fact that the elephant crossed by straight up walking through the pack of hippos, causing them to disperse unless they wanted to get trampled. One hippo didn't like that one bit and decided to face off with the elephant. The problem was that the elephant didn't care because it was so much bigger than the hippo. The hippo was relentless until a bunch of other elephants showed up. Soon the hippo finally realized that it was beat. This is a literal case of needing to pick on something your own size. Number 5. Zebra versus wildebeest. When it comes to zebras and wildebeest, many people think they're solely prey, just for bigger animals like lions and cheetahs, but they are truly so much more than that. These two species are able to understand the very nature of the world they live in, and honestly have a type of symbiotic bond that allows them to survive. How so? Well, they often find themselves in the same areas of the savanna, but eat different kinds of grass. Because of this, they can live in harmony in areas with plenty of food without infringing on each other's survival. The problem in this case happened at a watering hole. A young wildebeest had apparently gotten separated from its pack and felt it would be best to attach itself to the nearby zebras, which, believe it or not, is something that happens often. But then, when it started to cry out for its mother, a trio of zebras came up and attacked it, harshly, in a way that you wouldn't really expect from zebras. It's believed that the zebras heard the cry from the youngling and believed it would mark them as a target and put them in danger from bigger wildebeests, so they did what they thought was best for their pack. Can you really blame them? Number 4. Jaguar versus Cayman. This next tale is about a jaguar from Brazil called Scarface. Yes, that was its name. It was given to it by a photographer that followed it and chronicled its movements. Jaguars are known to be apex predators on land in Brazil. They're natural hunters capable of incredible speed and instincts that allow it to catch prey without much issue. But in this case, Scarface did something that the photographer didn't expect. It lunged off the land into a nearby river and attacked a cayman. If you aren't familiar, caymans are one of the most dangerous crocodile species in the world, so going after one is, let's just say, bold. But that right there is the twist. You'd think that in the water, the cayman would have the advantage, but because of the way Scarface attacked it and how it got its jaws around its opponent's neck, it was not able just to win, but win flawlessly. It dragged that cayman out of the water and went on its merry way as if it was just any other piece of meat. So, just like his namesake, this cat was a boss and king of the wild. Number 3. Gorilla versus photographer? It's honestly a little bit surprising it took us this long to get to a story of a human screwing up near animals. Because as we all hopefully know, humans are animals themselves. And humans can be quite stupid with how they handle themselves around other creatures. Such as when one photographer in Rwanda was observing a pack of silverback gorillas and decided to get as close as possible to them, not thinking about how the gorillas might not like that. Sure enough, the alpha male of the gorilla group took offense to the photographer's action and charged at him with a clenched fist. Thankfully, the photographer was able to escape and get good footage of the gorillas beforehand, but not without having a really close call. Number 2. Tiger versus crocodile. So we've already seen a jaguar going up against a crocodile and winning, but what about one of the other big cats? Let's say a tiger. This happened in India at a tiger reserve, and it did indeed feature a tiger going up against a croc, something that happens more often than you'd realize. The victor is usually determined by who can get the drop on who first. Not unlike the jaguar with its attack earlier. In this case though, it wasn't just a tiger going after prey, it was a case of a mama tiger going after the crocodile in order to protect its cubs. And to be clear, this wasn't a small crocodile like the jaguar had in proportion to its body. Instead, this was a 14-foot-long crocodile that the tiger was seen ripping apart and killing, all to save its cubs. When the picture and footage of this was released to the world, the tiger became instantly famous, and I'm not surprised. You go, Mama Tiger. Number 1. Lions versus rhinos versus elephants. In Kenya, a matchup between some of the big 5 occurred, and it was incredible. You see, lions may be the alphas of the savannah in many instances, but they tend to do things their way. In this case, they prefer to be stealthy and blindside opponents in order to get the advantage before they have the chance to counter an attack. And this is what they tried to do in Kenya, but they found themselves stalking a group of black rhinos. The problem for the lions, though, was the rhinos caught wind of them and charged at them, forcing them to scatter. But wait, there's more. Because after the lion dispersal, a third opponent arrived with a group of elephants. They helped get rid of the lions before focusing on the rhinos. A tense stare-down occurred. But then the elephants went away, maybe just backing down for now. While a full-blown scuffle didn't go down, it surely could have, and that would have been something truly epic to behold. Number 11. Mandolin moth. Let's start with the mandolin moth. So, is this a moth that resembles the musical instrument, the mandolin? Well, sort of. Like many other species, the male mandolin moth has a very specific way it attracts potential mates, and it's actually quite lovely. This insect has been romantically dubbed the mandolin moth by scientists because the male serenades the female when it's time to get busy. Their bodies really do slightly resemble a mandolin too. The hind wings of the male moth are concave instead of flat, just like the instrument. One of the veins in the wing has a knot in it, which the male scratches with his hind leg to produce a song. The tune that is played with this motion is said to be beautiful. As part of the courtship ritual, the male gracefully plays the tune to his mate to impress her. Aww, how cute! Number 10. Death's Head Hawk Moth. If you want to do a Hannibal Lecter quote, now would be the appropriate time to do it. If you recall the legendary poster for the classic horror movie, The Silence of the Lambs, you might remember that there's a moth on that poster, one that looks like it has a skull on its body. This is the Death's Head Hawk Moth, and it's one of 3 different moth species that have this unique mark. It really does look like a human skull from a distance, and even up close. It's larger than your average moth too, with its 5-inch wingspan, and it's one of the biggest moths in the world. But let's get back to that creepy skull. Noted for the human skull on its thorax, the moth has been surrounded by superstition and fear for quite some time, which is related both to the sinister marking and the moth's ability to emit a weird, loud chirp if agitated. Aside from being featured in The Silence of the Lambs, the moth has appeared in other media too, including Edgar Allan Poe's short story Sphinx and Bram Stoker's Dracula. Number 9. Brahmin moth. There are a lot of moth and butterfly species that have common patterns. The Brahmin moth is native to Southeast Asia. It has a wingspan that can reach up to almost 4 inches in length. It has large wings that display an array of beautiful patterns, dots, circles, and colors and stripes. The pattern sort of looks like a face of sorts, as the middle parts of the wings have sockets that look like eyes, and you could argue that it even has a mustache underneath them. The Brahmin moth is considered to be one of the weirdest moth species on the planet. I mean, even the caterpillar of this moth species is bizarre. Just as weird as what it does during the daytime, the Brahmin moths are nocturnal, meaning they'll go out and fly and get food during the nighttime, but when the sun is up, it'll perch itself on the body of a tree and then spread out its wings. And just stay there. Wouldn't that leave it open to predators? The answer is yes, but it has a defense mechanism. Not only does it have its pattern, which like other moths and butterflies will scare away certain creatures, but if that doesn't work and something approaches, it'll shake violently. To be clear, it won't fly away from danger, it'll just make the danger think it's not worth the effort. Kinda cool. Number 8. Luna moth. The luna moth looks nothing like other moths. Some say moths are the dirty version of butterflies in terms of their color scheme, but the luna moth is a beautiful and shimmering shade of green. It also has a wingspan that at times can reach over 7 inches end to end. The luna moth also doesn't have a mouth. So how does it eat? Well, it doesn't. In fact, if you look at the lifespan of the luna moth, you'll find that it only lives for a week when it enters adulthood. The energy it gets is from the fat stores that it made while it was a caterpillar. So why does it only live a week? That's because it only has one job: to reproduce. Certain species only make about 1 to 3 generations per year, so their adult lives are literally just focused on making the next generation and then dying. Woof, at least they don't have to worry about savings. Number 7. Carnivorous caterpillars. Ever heard of killer moths? No? What about killer caterpillars? There's a species of moth that is incredibly deadly when they're in their caterpillar state. So much so that they are carnivorous and don't eat leaves and other greens like most other caterpillars do. A great example comes from a species that are in Hawaii. Typically, the caterpillars have small claws that are meant to chop up leaves so that they can eat. but in these Hawaiian species, they're more like knives. They'll use them to kill flies that are nearby or other small insects. They'll do this by blending in with a leaf and making itself look like a twig. The insect will come along and it'll ambush them. Just as crazy and disgusting are the species known as Hyposmecoma molluscivora, which is also a moth species from Hawaii. What this one does though is more ravenous. It'll go after snails and trap them in silk threads. Then it'll dive into the snail's shells and eat them alive. Oof, does this freak you out? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Midget moths. As the saying goes, things come in all shapes and sizes, and as for the midget moths, they are incredibly weird and extremely small, and they're found all over the world. Just how small are they? They would fit on the tip of your pencil, barely. Their wingspans can be as little as 3 millimeters. That is incredibly small. Though, to be fair, there are some variations of the moth that can get up to 10 millimeters, but that's still a very small moth. Not surprisingly, these moths make their way by being miners. Typically, they mine through leaves, but other species go after seeds or the barks of certain trees. As if that wasn't enough, there are species that has a host plant where they typically live and mine the leaves of. One of these moths is known as the Pectinovalvinae, which are found here in Australia. They live in the area of certain key tree families and mine their leaves over time. There is also a belief that because of their size, some of these species await true discovery and study. More moth mysteries. Number 5. Vampire moth. The vampire moth, which is not to be confused with the Japanese movie Vampire Moth, might at first sound like an exaggeration of the vampire legend, as there are various animals out there that bear the vampire name but aren't exactly like the vampires of myth. But what makes the vampire moth so crazy is the fact that for the most part, it does live up to the legend. In this case, yes, it's a creature that sucks other creatures' blood, not unlike the infamous vampire bat. The difference is that the bat vampire isn't known to suck the blood of humans. But the vampire moth absolutely will, if given the opportunity, as it has the ability to pierce the skin of animals and humans. Just as important is that they can pierce the skin of rather thick-skinned animals too, like buffalo. But creepily, once the moth is in the victim, the very blood pressure of its prey makes it so the mouth extensions can't easily be shaken off. Fear not though, even with its blood-sucking ability, it can't seriously harm or kill a human, or a major animal for that matter. If a human's bitten by these moths, the spotted bit may turn a bit red and be sore for a few hours, leaving an itchy rash, but that's it. And as if all of that isn't enough on a creep factor, the vampire moth apparently has the ability to suck the tears out of the eyelids of certain animals like cattle. Gross! Number 4. Hummingbird hawk moth. The hummingbird hawk moth is a very curious creature for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that yes, the moth in question is named after the hummingbird, mainly because it does a lot of the same things and even resembles the famous bird. For example, the hummingbird bird is known to flap its wings incredibly fast in order to stay afloat and fly. The hummingbird hawk moth does the same thing. The hummingbird, the bird, is also known to feed on the nectar of flowers because of its massively thin nose, and so does the hummingbird hawk moth. The resemblance has been defined as convergent evolution, where two different species have very different ancestors, but are somehow able to resemble one another in their looks and abilities. It's said that the hummingbird hawk moth is a symbol of good luck, as a swarm of these moths was found in key events in history where a bunch of great things happened. I don't know about you, but I'm going to keep an eye out. Number 3. Heterogynous Penella. Some animals are known to eat their own in order to survive, but the moth species known as Heterogynous Penella have a very crazy way of doing it that isn't for the faint of heart. Typically, the females of an insect species will lay eggs of some kind for their young to be born, but not with the Heterogynous Penella. They literally have their children inside of them right after mating. The females will be born from a cocoon and then they'll stay close enough to it so that they can mate with the males. Then they'll return to the cocoon, and once the children are born, the children eat their mother. Why? It's so that they can be rich in fat when they grow and start truly living their lives. The mother is literally sacrificing herself so that the children can live as long as is necessary. Aw, isn't nature beautiful and gross? Number 2. Atlas moth. The atlas moth is massive. For a moth, It has a wingspan of about 10 inches, and that's just the start. These moths are so big that it's said they look like bats in flight and are often mistaken for them. Though if you look closely, while their wings are very large, their bodies are much smaller in comparison, which is typically not how it's supposed to go. Furthermore, not unlike a previous moth species, once they're adults, they don't eat. With a lifespan of about 1 to 2 weeks, they take a risk with every flight they take as it drains their fat stores from the previous phases of their lives. Some females are known not to fly at all and just wait for the males to find them so that they can mate. Just as odd, their cocoons are so large that they're used as purses in Taiwan. Number 1. Hornet moth. There are certain animals in the world that imitate others in order to stay alive. You might know of this from animals that mimic sounds or gestures in order to scare off predators, but in the case of the hornet moth, it takes mimicry to a level that is both weird but also an art form. Because, as the name suggests, it goes and mimics a hornet, but if you look at it and see how it acts, it doesn't just resemble it, it basically becomes it in a whole bunch of ways. The size of the moth is the same as the hornet. The coloring of its hair makes it look like a hornet. And finally, it has a flight pattern that makes it move like a hornet. All of this is to fool predators into thinking it's something it's not, and thus they won't mess with it. The funny thing is that it couldn't hurt them if it wanted to, because this is a completely harmless moth. It's just dolled itself up to make itself seem fierce. This is known as Batesian mimicry, and it's quite effective. Number 11. Mocking an alligator. Getting killed by an animal usually isn't dumb because some animals are totally unpredictable and quite powerful and can sometimes get aggressive. Some creatures are ambush predators that lie in wait for you to come by and strike. So yeah, getting killed by an animal isn't a bad way to go, unless you're the one that provoked the attack. This was the case in Texas in 2015. Near the border of Louisiana, a man named Tommy Woodward decided it was a good idea to mock the local alligators of a swamp and then jump into the swamp. Maybe he thought it was a brave thing to do. Most would agree it's just straight up stupid. He removed his shirt, removed his billfold, someone shouted a warning, and he said "blank the alligators" and jumped into the water and almost immediately cried out for help. Orange County Justice of the Peace Rodney Price said, Woodward yelled the F word before jumping in, and apparently the gators did not appreciate swearing. If his actions weren't dumb enough already, there were also multiple warning posts in the area, including a sign that literally said, "No swimming, alligators," which should have been a big clue not to dive in, but he did, and he died as a result. Number 10. The beard of Hans Steininger. If you've never heard the name Hans Steininger, that's alright. He lived hundreds of years ago in the 16th century in Austria. He was basically the mayor of a town known as Brunau am Inn. Steininger was well known and well liked by the people of the town he governed over, but what everyone would immediately notice about him is that he had an incredibly long beard that allegedly measured about 4.5 feet or 1.2 meters long. Truly impressive. I'm a bit jealous. It's said that the beard was so long that Hans would have to tuck it into his pocket as he walked around. One day in 1567, a raging fire broke out in his town and people were rightfully in a bit of shock and panic. And this is where his dumb death came into play. As he was trying to leave his home in a hurry, his beard came loose. He tripped over it as he went down a staircase, fell, broke his neck, and unfortunately died as a result. Despite his death, he was honored by his townspeople. They put a plaque on a wall for him and even cut off his beard and preserved it in a museum for countless years. It's still there to this day if you ever want to check out a truly magnificent beard. Number 9. The Bet. This next story comes from Reddit, and while you might wonder whether it's true or not, how incredibly dumb this death was can't be ignored. The Redditor was in medical school back in 1978, and 2 classmates of his decided to make a bet. The bet involved a cadaver, a fresh one that was to be used to dissect for the class. The student in question was dared to take the cut-off skull cap, also known as the culvaria, fill it with water and drink from it like a cup. Remember, this was a fresh cadaver and a newly cut off skull, which meant, as the Redditor revealed, there were still parts of the scalp, tissues, and more inside of that skull cap. Oh, and the bet was for $10. Not big money. The student did the dare and got the money, and then everything went wrong. He developed nausea, fever, abdominal pain, muscular aches and pains, and vomiting. Reports revealed that he was having an acute shutdown of the kidneys, generalized infection, and signs of liver failure. He died later that week. Hope the $10 was worth it. What's the dumbest bet you've ever made? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 8. Killed politely. There's a saying that goes, it won't kill you to be nice. But that doesn't mean you can't be killed because of the niceness you exude. If you don't believe it, we can prove it to you. Tycho Brahe was a famous Danish astronomer of the 16th century. He was of noble birth, and he was so popular with the king of his homeland that he was given an entire island to do with what he willed. In this case, he took the scientific route and had 2 observatories put in. He used these to great effect and has been credited with finding over 1,000 stars before telescopes were even around. But what killed him was his upbringing. Specifically, as a nobleman, he was taught to be extremely polite and adhere to the rules of decorum, especially as a guest. So when he was in Prague, after being exiled there during a banquet, he had to go to the bathroom. However, he felt it was impolite to do his business, so he held it in until the very end. At first, this may have seemed like a nice gesture, but it came at a cost. Holding it in caused serious infections within his body, and he died 11 days later, all because he was afraid he would offend someone by using the bathroom. Number 7. Swimming in a geyser. Yellowstone National Park is one of the most prestigious and beautiful places in the world. Thousands of people go there each year to see the wildlife and the natural wonders that were made by Mother Nature herself. One of those natural wonders are geysers. These are plumes of water that are caused by geological conditions under the earth. In this case, Yellowstone is over a supervolcano, which causes a lot of things to happen above and below the surface, including geysers. The reason we're telling you this is that while geysers are very cool to look at, they can also be extremely dangerous because they're boiling hot. The water is so hot and acidic that it can literally dissolve your body if you go into it, which is exactly what happened to Colin Scott in 2016. He and his sister were going through an illegal area in order to reach a hot pot where they could swim. Colin tripped and fell into the geyser, and because the water was so hot, he was unable to use his limbs properly and get out. His sister went for help, but it was too late. When the park officials arrived, portions of Colin Scott's head, upper torso and hands were visible in the hot spring. And that's all. Number 6. Died laughing. There are 2 movies that make the idea of dying laughing popular. Mary Poppins, the father's boss died laughing, if you recall, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where cartoons could die due to too much laughter. You might think such a thing is impossible, but actually, you really can die laughing if you're not careful. So goes the tale of Chrysippus. He was a Greek philosopher from the 3rd century BC. He was said to be a co-founder of Stoicism, even making logical teachings that we use today, such as the programming principle of if, then. He was a very serious man and very dedicated to his work. One day, at the age of 73, he saw a donkey eating a fig. Apparently, he thought this was the most hilarious thing he'd ever seen. He could not stop laughing at the scene. He laughed so hard he lost consciousness, and then he just never woke up. But how can laughter kill a person? Simple. Laughing expels air from your lungs, and when you're in a laughing fit, it can cause you to stop breathing. This can lead to asphyxiation or suffocation. The moral of this story is clearly you should be mindful of just how hard you laugh at a joke. Or if you're a comedian, use your power responsibly. Number 5. YouTube prank gone wrong. This one is both a dumb death and a warning to prevent future deaths from happening. Mona Lisa Perez and her boyfriend Pedro Ruiz were trying to get famous on YouTube during their early 20s. At first, their videos were harmless. Relatively small pranks as they went about their lives. But then, one day Pedro did some research and felt he had a really good prank in mind. He'd give his girlfriend a Desert Eagle pistol, which is one of the most powerful handguns in the world. He'd hold up a phone book and she'd shoot him. The idea was that it would be super scary, but that the phone book would stop the bullet. Except it didn't. In fact, it went right through the phone book and into his stomach. Mona Lisa called the police, but he was gone by the time they arrived. What's worse, their young daughter was in the area and witnessed the whole thing. If you're curious, yes, a phone book can stop a bullet after it gets hit by something else. Mythbusters proved this, but they also proved that the more powerful the round, the less effective the phone book would be. So bringing in a Desert Eagle and firing point blank at a phone book? Very dumb. Mona Lisa spent months in jail for the incident. We're pretty sure this wasn't the fame they were looking for. Number 4. Musical death. Jean-Baptiste Lully was an Italian-born French musician and dancer in the 1600s. He was very gifted in the realm of music and not just a practitioner. He was so good that King Louis XIV made him the royal composer, a true honor. Proving his worth, the music that he made was a staple of the royal family, and he received another promotion as a result, to be the music master of the royal family. Louis lived a full life. His talents were put to good use, but it would be that same love for music that would ultimately end his life, while conducting no less. How is that possible? Well, in those days, conductors didn't use batons to signal timing and cues, but rather a heavy staff. They would beat the ground in order to keep time for the musicians, and during one performance, Louis accidentally hit his own foot with the heavy staff. Ouch! This caused severe infections that would kill him if his leg wasn't removed, but he wanted to dance again. So he refused to give up his leg, and he died 2 months later. All because he refused to give up one of his talents, and as a result, gave up on all of them. Number 3. Backflip woes. Celebrations in sports are nothing new, and in fact, each sport has its own version of a victory dance that helps punctuate a key moment. The problem is, though, that players throughout all sports have been known to show off a little too much, sometimes getting very vulgar in their motions, and so the leagues banned various moves and gestures. In the case of one Indian soccer player, Peter Bayakzangzula, he celebrated a little too hard. He did a dance move ending with a somersault. The result was a spinal cord injury. He was trying to mimic a soccer player from Germany who was known to do a backflip after a goal, but he didn't do it properly and landed awkwardly. 5 days later, he died in the hospital. What started as a simple celebration ended in tragedy. Number 2. Alarm clock. Sam Wardle was a simple man of the 1800s. He lived in New York and his job was a lamplighter. Specifically, he would turn the street lamps on when night fell and turn them off when morning came. Seems simple enough, right? But there was a catch to his job that many of you are likely not thinking of. Mainly, he would have to wake up really early in the morning to go and turn off the lamps, so he needed an alarm clock to go and not just ring, but ensure that he would wake up without fail. So he attached his regular alarm clock to a shelf that had a 10-pound stone on it. When the alarm would go off, the shelf would collapse, the rock would drop, and the noise it made would wake Sam up. All in all, a clever idea. Honestly, I'd probably try it. But then, for a Christmas party, he moved the bed around so it was right under the shelf. He got drunk at the party and forgot to move the bed back. So when the alarm went off, the shelf collapsed, the rock dropped and landed right on his head, killing him. Number 1. Gary Hoy. Have you or someone you know did something because you looked at the action in question and went, "There's nothing that could possibly go wrong here," and yet, obviously, it did? Sadly, this happens a lot in the world, and it leads to some really dumb accidents and deaths, such as with Gary Hoy. He was a lawyer at a firm in Toronto, one that was on the 24th floor of the building no less. Gary decided to go test the windows of the building in front of a group of touring students, no doubt trying to both scare them and impress them. Again, nothing could possibly go wrong, right? Well, the first attempt went fine, but after putting his full weight into it, he got the glass to pop out of the frame and he plummeted to his death. This infamous death has become a piece of pop culture and was even highlighted on 2 different TV shows because of how brutal and dumb the event was. So yeah guys, don't throw yourself at windows. Thanks for watching. Which one of these deaths did you think was the dumbest? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and we'll see you next time on the channel. Bye!